how in Botswana, the government is trying to use, and we see the constraint there. We have a system and which is incorporated in a new context. So they have a house of chief. Okay, they play a role of advisor, but you see, in a certain way, it is marginalized. So we continue the system inherited from the colonization, and we give a marginal place to the indigenous, and that is a wrong direction. That's not what needs to be done. I think we need to refound the education, the whole treatment, if we want to be serious of reusing. So one of the constraint is that one, the constraint of the state, which is structured in a way that it gives only a marginal place to this indigenous. And I think that is a constraint. The other constraint is the fact that we are living in a more and more urbanized societies where the people, especially the youngster, they have no clue, no idea of all these spiritual things that we are talking about. So, and even adults, I mean, even those people, we call it officials, they don't know. So the limitation is that you can't apply that kind of system if there is no education behind. So the constraint of the education, preparing people to this, is another limitation that I have in mind. But I let the other also perhaps add.
Merci, Ali. Donc, en gros, on dit dans les limites, d'abord, il faut connaître, et reconnaître ces systèmes-là, ces façons de fonctionner et de fonctionner. Et ça suppose une socialisation, l'enseignement, ça suppose un travail aussi des chercheurs. Mais pour que les chercheurs s'y intéressent, il faut qu'eux aussi soient décolonisés un tant soit peu. Donc, cette dimension est extrêmement importante. Et il y a quelqu'un, je crois que c'est le professeur Yuga de Yaoundé, qui a dit, comme dans ses observations, que, bon, endogène, exogène, c'est pas forcément la bonne approche. Ça, on est d'accord pour dire que c'est un point d'entrée et que, en fait, au fond, il faut arriver à trouver des systèmes efficients, ce qui est largement vrai aussi. Et si on revient sur cette question, c'est aussi parce que cette efficience fait défaut. Donc, parmi les contraintes, on peut penser aussi, si on voit un certain nombre d'expériences, que ce soit le Botswana, le Rwanda ou autre, ou même le Burkina Faso et le Mali actuel, on peut penser qu'il y a aussi la question de la volonté. La volonté à la fois politique et la volonté des élites. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Est-ce que c'est une dimension importante dans les contraintes?
Do you think that this is an important dimension and that this is another constraint?
Alors, il y a Alice qui veut prendre la parole.
Alice wants to take the floor. Please go ahead.
Et après, c'est Larissa aussi.
And then Clarissa. Yes, that's clear. There is a question of will. But there is also education. We participate in education, our education, and sometimes our education does not prepare us, because this education stigmatizes us. So there is the political will, but there are also reflexes. And I know it myself because I work in education, and sometimes people have acquired paradigms and are very attached to them because they have specializations and it's part of their identity. It has become their identity and they have learned to defend it. And when it's in a socio-political context, which does not have enough resources to seek another identity, a homegrown identity, as opposed to the acquired identity, That is an issue because people are not ready. We need years of structural adjustment. And there are not enough resources in order to explore and revalue this. It's not that there is a lack of will, but there is a real possibility. There is a need, and there is also
il y a 4 générations des Rwandais dans les commandes n'avaient pas nécessairement toute la mémoire. Ils ont dû consulter, poser des questions, mais comment ça se faisait avant? Qu'est-ce qu'on peut apprendre? Et je pense que ce temps dédié à s'interroger sur les outils qui existaient, mais aussi si ceux qui ont analysé la situation rwandaise de près savent bien que c'était une époque aussi où on demandait au Rwanda de payer pour les dépenses qui ont été faites, y compris à acheter des armes pour le génocide. C'était un moment où l'aide internationale était complètement... Donc, il y a eu un retour sur soi pour chercher en soi. Merci.
Merci Alice. Merci beaucoup Alice. Donc en fait, Alice remet un peu la barre aussi sur la question de l'éducation, mais elle ramène une dimension extrêmement importante qui est évidente, c'est la question des moyens. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a aussi une bataille qui va consister, et Augustin là a un peu défloré le sujet, parce qu'effectivement, il faut des programmes si vous voulez mettre en avant ce genre de solutions, si on veut faire revenir, renaître, réémerger les solutions, il faut des moyens. Or, les moyens, pour le moment, ils sont déjà affectés à certaines priorités, à ce qui est considéré comme des priorités. C'est-à-dire que si vous avez un problème par rapport aux matières premières, par rapport au pétrole ou par rapport à ci ou ça, vous allez forcément trouver plus de moyens que si vous dites, voilà, j'ai un programme sur la pharmacopée, par exemple, de je ne sais pas quelle région. D'accord? Alors que cette pharmacopée, aujourd'hui, elle soigne plus de gens que les médecins de ville. C'est-à-dire que quand vous regardez bien statistiquement aujourd'hui, en tout cas pour ce qui est de l'Afrique, il y a, je ne sais pas, un ou deux médecins pour 10 000 personnes. Donc, il est évident que les gens, s'ils arrivent à vivre, c'est aussi parce qu'ils vont consulter les médecins traditionnels, parmi lesquels, évidemment, dans le flou, il y a aussi des faux. C'est évident, il y a aussi des charlatans. Mais dans les faits, il y a quand même une vraie productivité et on se demande pourquoi ils ne sont pas considérés dans le système de santé global des pays. Donc, pour aller vers les policy implications, moi, ce que je vous entends dire, c'est que probablement, il faut faire un travail déjà pour mieux faire connaître et mieux faire reconnaître les enjeux de cette question-là, qu'on l'appelle endogène, qu'on l'appelle renaissance, qu'on l'appelle recherche d'efficience, etc., qu'on appelle traditionnelle. Mais il y a sûrement à redonner peut-être à cette question l'importance qu'elle mérite au sein des priorités des élites, au sein des préférences des élites, qu'elles soient culturelles, intellectuelles, politiques, etc. Et peut-être qu'Ali va en parler un petit peu, mais ça va être probablement aussi, je l'espère, une des contributions du travail que nous faisons. J'entends donc éducation, j'entends production aussi intellectuelle et production de recherche, puisque c'est sur ce terrain que nous nous trouvons. Il y a aussi une affaire de décolonisation des mentalités qui se joue dans ce qui a été dit pour le moment. Alors, avant que Ali ne prenne la parole, une longue parole, il y a Larissa qui a levé la main de nouveau, et comme on ne peut rien refuser au Brésil et au Quilombo, qu'elle prenne la parole.
Je vais vite parler, c'est que les médecins traditionnels, ils vont sauver plein de gens, And doctors, they will save a lot of lives. And as you say, maybe a small proportion of them will be charlatans, but there will be charlatans in traditional Western doctors too, mind you. So that proportion is probably the same. And the modern Western official doctors all have the law on their side, even though they may be total losers and crap charlatans. So that's the problem and the injustice, of course, in the equation. And on the traditional side, we have no lawyer, we have no banks and funds to back up basically or champion the positive results or defend them against sorcery accusations.
For instance, one of the actions that a government really committed to do something on this can do is to create a task force at not at the culture ministry. You know, the culture ministry, they never deal with the essential thing of the culture. They deal with amusement, entertainment, dance, and that's how the people understand, especially ministry. Culture as a resource to development is not always so. I see a task force at the executive level, I mean, presidency or prime ministry, to really, first of all, having a program, a clear program with different phases. One of the first phases is to collect, to identify and collect all those different indigenous systems that exist. Because in many countries, we know one or two, but we don't know all the different, especially in countries where some of the communities are marginalized politically.
Yeah.
And you are in Cameroon, you are well placed to know. So doing that, a comprehensive a task force which a comprehensive study to be done by our center of research, universities, and all that. Then the second phase for me would be a critical review of that, because here also there is a changement in ours. I mean, some of the governance, for instance, system of governance don't give any room for women, especially that is the case for the hair. It's man-oriented. If it protects women in a certain way, but the decision making is made only by man and all that. So we have to review all this tradition to see those. I mean, how I can say, to nettoyer, how you say,
clean
up, to because and then I think the third step would be to see at a country level how we can find common value from these different indigenous within a country, so that every group can be also recognized in their culture, and their indigenous system can be also recognized and taken into account into a framework of the value and the system. So I see this is what I have thought about a concrete step for a government willing to do. I see that Augustin is laughing, but I stay there. I am perhaps a dreamer, but
no, this is a baby. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that is a proposal for me, the step forward.
Thank you, Ali. I think Yopo has something to propose now.
No, it is a general comment. It is a comment. C'est sur la question des moyens. Je crois les moyens, on peut les.
Going back to the question of means, capacities are always findable if you really know what you want, and usually you deploy them in times of crisis again. But there's something I could draw from Professor Keleglisi. Just after the genocide, we've asked Rwanda to pay for the weapons that serve to kill part of their tribes in order to benefit from the reconciliation process. So that was part of a twisted kind of paradoxical solution. And they did manage to organize their way around it nevertheless. And the third example I can think of is something I lived and experienced in Mali, for example. We were quite young and innocent, perhaps, but I do not remember running into major difficulties in our daily lives, even though all financial means have been temporarily cut in the wake of our crisis resolution process. So it worked really well. I think there's a lesson to be drawn common to those three examples I've just quoted. Let's just say you've got to believe in your own worth and in your own capacities rather than relying on external ones, because otherwise you'll ever stay paralyzed, basically. So I'd like to conclude with a joke, because a friend of mine was telling me, if Cheops were to come back to the huge pyramid telling us, hi, I am Cheops, and it's a Bantu telling this story, our reaction would say, no, it's not you. We're not believing you for a minute. How could you turn up with that at the World Bank? Who gave you the money for it? And you see, it's a bit of an anecdote and a joke, but the issue of financial means is really, in my opinion, to stay anecdotal. It should not be a major obstacle. Thank you for this wise observation. I think there are several elements in the discussion. Some people come in the chat with the observation that, after all,
any society that denies women the right to lead, regardless of whether it thinks it can represent them, is denying a basic right. OK. Donc là aussi, sur un certain nombre de... C'est important. Que nous avons de ce qu'on appelle rapidement.
And in that respect, say, in what we call endogenous factors, traditional ones, or whatever you call them, there are some bias common to the Western European ones, basically, and ours. Because, for example, in some models presented to us concerning the Maroon community, where we were told that women were present at all levels of discussion of the decision-making process, even though most chiefs were men. So this was apparently not related to us as being an issue. But if we analyze it through the lens of our contemporary gender-biased analytical grids or policy tools, it will be tagged as a total discrimination instance, for example. So should we make an effort of transposing our traditional benchmarks also in our observation tools? I mean, in our methodological approaches, I am not sure I have an answer at this stage to all of these questions, but in this debate of the right balance between the endogenous, exogenous, or universal and local theories, we have to make allowance for these Eurocentered bias. So that's why I wanted to put forward not so much the individual as the person, because the individual is defined socially, whereas the person, strictly speaking, does not have that many implications or connotations. So reasoning on the living species, for example, or the human being is perhaps less risky. And the Africans in that respect have a sense of fraternity between the different species. For example, they would tend to call an elephant an uncle of them or make a relative out of it because he occupies this or that role and that place in his social organization. So the point is not here to have everyone traveling to Africa with a perfect, common, aligned safari vision. So
interpreting this indigenous. But what I am suggesting is that at the level of each country, after the collection, identification of those indigenous, there is a national debate to discuss what can be accepted, what is still valid, and some of the element or aspect of feature of that indigenous that need perhaps to be changed because it doesn't respond to the contemporary society in which we are living. But this debate should happen after the collection, and this is what we call the reinterpretation of, and by creating this national debate on that, open not only to scholars at the university, but even integrating politicians, policymakers, and officials, and of course, all the stakeholders, I think we can really say that in that case, we engage in a process of reappropriating and re-owning our own indigenous systems and philosophy and all that. That is what we need. Not only a kind of marginal thing here and there in one university, a global debate at the national level through all the media that exist in a country, classical and electronic, to engage the debate, because there is a lot to say, a lot to discuss, and a lot of controversy and also, but I think that is the price that we have to pay to go in the direction that we have indicated during this discussion.